They called her the Observer, a nickname passed in whispers, half mocking, half curious, meant to describe the silent woman who sat at the far edge of Outpost Lancer, a remote and barely acknowledged installation buried in the Peruvian Andes, a place so hidden from the maps and missions that even most in the military questioned if it still existed. And yet there she was, every morning before dawn, seated on the ridgeline with binoculars in hand and an expression that betrayed nothing, not boredom, not interest, just constant, vigilant stillness, like she was carved from the same stone that held the ancient ruins below the base. And nobody really talked to her except for routine check-ins. Because technically, she was part of extended intelligence surveillance, a catch-all term for operations nobody wanted to explain. And because her file, what little of it was visible, simply listed her as Specialist Mara Lynn, Intel attached, honorably discharged from field duty following undisclosed complications, which was itself a redacted location that no commanding officer ever wanted to be associated with. And so, while the infantry ran drills and the pilots complained about the air density and the techs recalibrated satellites that never quite stayed aligned, Mara Lynn sat and watched and noted and waited, day after day, in a post they said was ceremonial at best and laughable at worst, until the day the storm rolled in, not the weather, but the kind of storm that shifts atmospheres and rearranges realities. Because it began with a radio call that shouldn't have reached them. A single static-laced signal bounced from a decommissioned NORAD relay, carrying only 6 words. They are coming through the dark. And for 3 seconds, every system flickered, every screen froze. And the temperature dropped 12 degrees. And though it all returned to normal, a moment later, something inside the base had changed. Not just the data or the electricity, but the feeling that they were no longer the ones watching. And that night, the first drone patrol vanished, no wreckage, no beacon, just disappeared. And when the second recon unit was scrambled to investigate, only one of the 4 men returned, bloodied, blindfolded, and mumbling something about the glass city and the red eyes. And nobody laughed anymore, not even Sergeant Cray, who'd once tried to sneak a donut under Mara's binoculars to see if she could break character, and got only silence in response. Because now they were afraid. Because now even the highest level encrypted communications were going dark for minutes at a time. And some of the more paranoid officers started demanding reassignment. And a rumor started among the rookies that the outpost was cursed, that the ancient ruins beneath them were waking up, and that Mara Lynn was some kind of sentinel meant to keep it all contained. And when Major Declan, newly rotated in from Brussels, reviewed the staff and reached Mara's name, he raised an eyebrow and asked, "Why is her clearance higher than mine?" Only to be told that her clearance didn't even register in the same system, that it belonged to a separate branch of command entirely, a phantom arm of operations called SINGE, which nobody would explain. And when Declan pressed, Colonel Marin simply replied, "You don't ask about her, you just stay alive." And for the first time in Declan's life, he obeyed without argument. And then, on the night of the breach, the night when everything fell apart, there was no warning, no siren, no flash, just a low vibration, like the mountain itself was growling. And then came the lights, not from the sky, but from the earth, rising through the cracks of the ancient stone beneath the outpost, casting everything in a flickering violet hue. And suddenly, the base AI screamed. Offline, the drones crashed mid-air, and an invisible wave swept through the perimeter, short-circuiting every weapon, every comms unit, every sensor. And in that moment, surrounded by chaos and powerless to stop it, all eyes turned to Mara Lynn, who had already stood, already descended the ridge, and was now walking moving like gravity didn't apply to her, into the breach zone, where something was emerging. Not soldiers, not aircraft, but shadows. Tall and flickering like smoke turned sentient, their forms twisting unnaturally. And when one reached forward, with an appendage made of crackling static and heat, Mara didn't flinch. She simply held up her arm, revealing what everyone thought was a faded scar, but was in fact a glowing emblem, shaped like an inverted trident wrapped in binary coils. And at the sight of it, the shadows froze, trembled, and then backed away, collapsing into themselves, like a tape rewinding. And when it was over, when the lights vanished and the systems flickered back to life, she was standing there alone, untouched, eyes closed, like she had just ended a conversation no one else could hear. And though questions erupted instantly, who was she? What was that symbol? What were those things Mara said? Nothing. Just walked back to the ridge, sat down again, and resumed her watch. And over the following weeks, the Pentagon sent evaluators, scientists, even a full contingent from the Joint Special Operations Command, but none returned with answers, only more questions. Because none could access her full file, and the only person who seemed to know anything was Admiral Cowrie, an old legend with one eye, and more medals than uniform space, who arrived one afternoon unannounced, approached Mara silently, and after looking at her for a long moment, said, "They told me Ember 1 was lost." To which she replied, "Ember 1 fell, I burned alone," and without another word, he saluted her not casually, but formal, hand trembling, and left. And after that, the command structure shifted subtly. Soldiers started saluting her without prompting. Commanders deferred to her opinion on threat assessments, and even the new recruits, who hadn't witnessed the breach, treated her with the kind of reverence usually reserved for monuments or fallen heroes. And in time, another symbol appeared beside her post, an insignia, carved into the rock itself, matching the one on her arm, and beneath it, a single phrase. She seized the silence. And it was understood, though never officially spoken, that Marilyn was not just stationed at Lancer. She was Lancer, and that her watch was not optional, not ceremonial, but essential, because whatever was beneath those mountains, it hadn't been stopped, only warned, and she was the warning. The last ember of a fire that burned so hot in secret, it left no ash behind, only a sentinel with steady hands and eyes that never blinked. And now, years later, if you ask anyone stationed at Lancer who commands the base, they won't say the colonel or the general, they'll just nod toward the ridgeline, where a woman with a scarred emblem and a stillness that humbles war itself, continues to watch the horizon, waiting not for recognition, but for the next ripple in the dark, and woe to whatever dares breach her line again.